Marcus Aurelius, a very renowned philosopher and politician, suggested that to stay neutral through knowledge allows one to become as a living embodiment of a god. In his book, Meditations, he says, for a man not to do evil goes against his natural instincts. Now, what's interesting about that saying is that what happens when power is achieved? When power is achieved, the individual becomes obsessed with gaining more power, becoming obsessed through corruption and willing to do whatever it takes to stay in power. Julius Caesar was perhaps one of the greatest emperors of Roman history. He had the knowledge of the Stoics. He was cunning like a serpent, and he was a military tactician. He went into foreign countries just to look around, only to return back to the Roman Empire. There was one instance where he went into Germany, or what is now known as Germany. His men built a bridge across the Rhine, and when it went into the other side of the river, looked around, only to come back, tear the bridge down, and go home. He took an entire legion of men with him. An entire legion of men. He became obsessed through his embodiment of the triumvirate with the Eyes of March. Now, the Eyes of March are where you become deified, glorified even as a potential god in your field. And it's interesting because we see another perspective when we look at Alexander the Great. This man conquered a lot of Asia before dying. You look at all the tools that he used at his disposal. His disposal, I mean, he used elephants, he used donkeys, he used wagons. He was highly adaptable to just about every type of terrain that you can come across. Went up against some of the most formidable opponents and came away victorious, at least until he became sick and died. We see this again with Napoleon, a brilliant emperor, little vertically challenged, height wise, but he was a brilliant man. He escaped imprisonment, became emperor yet again after his capture and confinement, created not one but two armies, and on top of that, he invaded Russia, one of two countries to ever invade Russia. And you notice I said invade. I did not say conquer. The Roman Empire conquered Russia once. They conquered the known world, but never Asia. Ironic how that worked. But here it is. As he retreated, they burnt everything, destroyed everything, poisoned everything, leaving nothing for the enemy to gain, to prosper from. Interesting. Sun Tzu put forth 6 Stoic rules of warfare. Just 6. He created the art of war. He was a master technician through the 5 elements of warfare. So when we look at what does it take to become a god or a goddess, I mean, look at Joan of Arc, the Joan of wherever the hell she was from, in France, the Maid of Lorraine. There we go. We see where this common girl witnessed her family be murdered, her sisters and mother raped. She ended up becoming an emissary of her god. She gathered the ear of the king of France, waged war against the Welsh, England, driving them out, gained the respect of the soldiers, because up until that point, no woman has ever led men in the battlefield. And you hear of the Amazonians, these women of tribal society, who are known as the most feared embodiment of warriors. Sneaky, silent, and deadly. But the Maid of Lorraine, to whom we call Joan of Arc, was the very first woman to literally gain the respect of an entire country, from the people to the military. Even the king himself respected her. But over a political power struggle between the church and the enemy, gave her up. Gave her up. Why? Because she had a scorpion. Because she had men's clothing on. And at the time, that was unidealistic of what a woman was supposed to wear. They burned her alive at the stake. The 11th century. Amazing. So ask yourselves this: what does it take to ascend or descend to godhood or from godhood? Throughout history, throughout folklore, throughout religious texts, we see where 2 applications come into play. The first is apotheosis. Now, what is apotheosis? If we go by, let's go by a Russian or a Slavic deity by the name of Kakashi the Deathless. Kakashi the Deathless was a practicing necromancer. he made a deal with crone, another practitioner, a crone known as Baba Yaga. Now, we all have heard the stories of Baba Yaga. Hell, they even use Baba Yaga in various different Hollywood produced films, from Supernatural to John Wick. Well, apparently, John Wick, played by Keanu Reeves, is now considered Baba Yaga. Now, instead of having a feminine scorpion, if you will, now he's got a pink stick. Wow. So, anyways, let's move on here. So, we see where he makes this deal and he becomes associated with the golden hen, the golden egg effect, where the soul is removed, placed in item after item after item, and finally placed on a mysterious island. Folklore suggests that by knowing the name of a spirit or entity gives you the power over that entity. In this case, in the case of Kakashi, if you ever found his soul, you had power over him. Hmm. Interesting how that works, right? So, Apotheosis is based off a lifetime of study and practice through dedication and commitment. And it's interesting to see how this is a lifetime worth of achievement, much like the Nephilim from the books of Enoch, or the sixth book of Genesis, the book of Giants, for an example, where the sons and daughters, basically children of the daughters of men and children of perdition, gave birth to Nephilim, these giants in the land, known as men of renowned knowledge and wisdom. This is a form of apotheosis where they've dedicated their life to knowledge, to wisdom, to studies, to alchemy, to various different degrees of practice. Only upon their deathbed do they receive the fruits of their labor. They end up having the keys handed to them. I mean, think about this. I mean, you have Gandhi, you have Jesus of Nazareth, you have Buddha, you've got these so called sainthood types, these zealots, such as cardinals, bishops, the Pope, ministers of various different religious sects, dedicate themselves to following the scripture, learning about them. I mean, when the Quran was created, it was created off tolerance. It was a book about peace and understanding. But yet, through the actions of a few zealots, it's become about terrorism. You put a book of peace or of, say, for example, demonolatry in the hands of a zealot, what happens? You end up with the Hitler effect. You look at the seal known as the swastika. This seal has been used for hundreds of years from various different religious and philosophical, magical, and super, practices of various different types. But it wasn't until Adolf Hitler got a hold of it that it became a vile, evil thing. So here it is. Knowing and seeing how this plays out, apotheosis is the gathering of knowledge throughout one's lifetime, only to have that key, that godhood given to you upon your deathbed. Now, the other aspect of this we see from various different old scrolls, we see from ancient texts, we see from classical plays, and we see from religious doctrines. Okay, and this is known as divinization process. Okay, now this is where one ascends to godhood. In ancient Greek, we see the tales of Giglamesh. Giglamesh was somebody who actually sought out godlike power. Okay, now Giglamesh, in the epic tales of Giglamesh, he actually went out and found the Ambrosia, which is basically also known as the food of the gods. Ironic how that happens, right? Food of the gods. Whew. But yet, we also see where the ascension process can also be done through the embedment of oneself. Learning psionics, for an example, or spiritual warfare, psionic warfare. You can affect somebody else through the practices of witchcraft, sorcery, which is why witchcraft of any kind is feared, frowned upon, and looked down on as devil worship or the practices of Satan in today's world. Now, look at it from this perspective. If you're doing a curse, if you are doing a curse or a hex, be it a Trabajo or an Amari, you want to link the spell between an effigy and the intended target or victim. So you would need something personal from that person, right? Be it saliva, lock of hair, fingernail clippings, perhaps even their own DNA, blood. Because the red blood cells contain various different properties that are very potent and magical services. I mean, Jesus said that it was in the power of the blood. Power of the blood. Now, you look at all these Christians today, these JCI zealots, who really don't know any better because of their brainwashing, the way they were trained from birth. So they really didn't have a chance to study things like the epic tale of Giglamesh, or, say, for example, the Zohar, the Talmud, or say, for example, the Jewish Haggadah. I mean, a lot of them don't even realize that all their texts come from Jewish traditions and Hebrew traditions, not just the Hebraic systems. So things like understanding that the fact that a lot of the mysticism came from Jewish and Hebrew. I mean, even their Bible shows this aspect. So when we are looking at things like godhood, we see, for example, the foods of the gods. For example, Idun's apples or lichdom practices. You've got um, your Shanabi type foods, and you're seeing the religious aspects from charisma, worship, great works, and teachings. So I mean, there's a lot that's going into them, but in necromantic rites, we're also seeing where a person can gain godlike power through reanimating, reanimation, or that of reincarnation. I mean, again, we're looking at Buddha in Buddhism, where Buddha is said to reincarnate every so often. Okay. Hell, even in Christian teachings, Jesus is supposed to come back. Okay. So again, you're seeing reincarnation. So even then, when you look at it from a religious perspective, you know, let's go into the Bible for an example. And this is a key form here, is if you remember, I told you that we also see this in religious texts. So I'm going to get into this religious text form right here. So I ask that you be patient and understanding. Okay. So the Dalai Lama, for an example, is another variation of reanimation. And we kind of see this in the Bible as God impregnating the wife, which basically violates the Ten Commandments because it says, "Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife," right? Wow. Well, God just violated that fucking oath right there. Don't do this shit. And what does he do? Ah, oops. Thanks, Dick. Wrong hole. Um, hmm. Interesting, right? So, so basically, um, he impregnates Mary, mother of Jesus. Okay, so this is known as the virgin birth, right? So, a woman that supposedly never had sex in her life, but yet here she is knocked up. Now, I don't know about you, but when's the last time you heard of a virgin birth? Just saying. There have been medically documented, aspects and discoveries of women who have gotten pregnant even though their hymens are still intact. This is something that is actually well documented worldwide, but it is not classified as virgin. Okay, so so we see, okay, he's been born. Okay, he ends up she ends up marrying Joseph, and he is born of a virgin, according to Matthew's chapter 1. Okay, and they show him with two different names, and a lot of times Christians get this mixed up and they end up kind of meshing them together in a corrupted format. Now, the first name that we see in verse 22 of the King James Version is Emmanuel. And Emmanuel basically translates into English as God with us. Okay. And then you drop down a couple of verses to verse 24, and we see the name changes from Emmanuel to Jesus, meaning in Hebrew, Son of God. Okay. Now, the term Lord or King of Kings, Lord of Lords, we've seen this throughout history as well. The Greek wars, for an example, where there was one king who looked to be the king of all the other regions, the kings from all other regions. Okay, but we've also seen the title Lord being given to those who own a plantation. Okay, a kingdom or some kind of regional aspect where they ruled over, such as a duke, a duchess. They were known as Lord, Duchess and Lord. Okay, so if you served one of these people, they would refer to themselves as, "I serve the Lord." Okay, my Lord. Okay, and Christians have taken this to a whole new level, stating, "Hey, he's the Lord of Lord, King of Kings. He's almighty, omnipotent, and the like." Okay, so basically now you see where he has descended through various different means in the past 4,000 years, from the burning bush to appearing through a rift, you know in the sands of time, so to speak, angels appearing, Jacob's ladder that we see in the book of Mark, for an example, New Testament. And we also see the various different communication aspects between the master and the legions that he rules over. Okay, where Michael, the archangel, comes down, talks to certain individuals, slaughters an entire armada, under the cloak of darkness, the whole thing. But we also see where prophets have seen these angels and say, "Hey, I'm protected because fire didn't, or the furnace didn't, you know, hurt them." Now, the classification here is three went into the furnace, but yet when they opened up the doors, four beings were there. Okay. Daniel was thrown down into a pit with ferocious lions, right? But yet they didn't eat him. But yet they targeted the enemy. Wow. Interesting how that is, right? But yet it was said that these angels were warriors. They protected these prophets and children of the gods, the chosen. Okay, in ancient pantheons, we see the same exact thing of where the children of the gods, Zeus's bastardized children, for an example, from all his affairs, the demigods, developed their powers over time. Again, we're seeing the development of godlike power through the tools of the trade. Look at Hercules, one of the biggest ones there. Okay. Um, there's been a lot of traditions where these demigods have emerged with almost godlike power, superhuman strength, to heightened, intellectualism. They could read your mind. They could do a lot of different things, summon the powers of the gods, even. And it's amazing to see these things because now we're seeing it in the Bible. Okay. So by the time you get to the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, now we're seeing from the beginning. And we see in the beginning was God, right? It was in the beginning, God, the Spirit of God hovered over the earth, which was dead and void. But wait for it. Let's go into the New Testament, right? Wow, in the beginning was the Word. The Word. The Word was with God, the Word was God, and the Word is with God, yada, yada, yada. But drop down a few applications here. And it said, and the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us for a little bit. Now, here's the kicker. Remember, I mentioned Mary, Joseph, and Jesus. Okay. The Dalai Lama, Buddha, even. Doesn't matter if it's Allah, Yeshua, Yahweh, Jesus. These are all white light deities, forcing their will onto the planes of humanity. So basically, apotheosis in Greek means to deify. In Latin, it means deification. So, how do we classify deification from deifying? Deifying somebody is acknowledging that they are above and beyond normal perception. Look at let's look at Chris Angel for an example. How about David Blaine? Two of the world's most popular magicians. Would they not be deified as somebody who has godlike power? Not that they ate the food of the gods, but learn to harness godlike power. And certain monks have the ability to channel heat through their hearts, generating such heat that they could be butt ass naked in the middle of the wilderness and frozen lands and generate such heat that it keeps the entire group of people warm. Some even can channel the heat through the hands. Some have formed such sensitivity to energies and currents that they can speak to spirits. They can feel changes going on in the world. We call it empaths, mediumship. Is this not a form of deification? To where the world of the mundane would look at you and be so fretful because they realize you're not only smarter than them, but you're more powerful. Therefore, you have been deified as a god in reality, in the flesh. So, this is where the living can literally become a god while still alive. Whereas in apotheosis, you're given the god or sainthood after you die. So I'm going to give you some scriptures and kind of tell you some stuff here. In 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 4, it is said that he became human to make humans, basically meaning partakers of the divine nature. Imagine that. God became man to make man. But yet, if you go back to Genesis 1, chapter 1, verses 27 and 28, or that of chapter 2, verses 16 and 17, and again in chapter 3, verse 16 area, we see where God made man and woman equals in the likeness of his appearance, right? But yet in chapter 3, you see a whole nother thing. So you've gone from being incorporeal to corporeal, to be manifested in the real world, the human world. And you're going to remove a rib from the man and create a woman. Now, if you've already made man and woman in your image, why do you have to keep remaking them? You see the point there. But yet, in 2 Peter, verse 1, verse 4, he became man to create man. To create humans. To become to show you that you can become partakers of the divine nature. Okay. John 10:34. Jesus referred to Psalms 82, verse 6, where he said, "It is not written in your laws, I have said you are gods." You are gods already, right? You are gods already. So, if you're a god already, then why do you want to worship a god? In fact, why do you fear those who are literally living up to their potential? So, 2 Peter 1:4, Romans 8, verses 9 through 17, Galatians chapter 4, 5 through 7, and 17:21 through 23 of Galatians, we see where man is made in the image and likeness of God. Basically, the deification process. You're being given the keys to the kingdom, or the kingdoms, depending on the various different types of religions. So, what is deification but the idea of spiritualism in the Greek theosis? Theology in Latin refers to two separate aspects: natural life and supernatural life. And this is normally due to prayer and experiments. So, when you think about this in this perspective, The world revolves around two aspects: reality, from what the world believes you can do. And we see this through the slavehood process of laws and different perspectives. 9 times out of 10, or in most cases 10 out of 10, you're not going to see somebody being sworn into office through any other book than that of the Bible. Schools today are setting up rooms specifically for those who practice Islam. But what about Satanism, Wicca, or, say, for example, African Caribbean traditions? But yet, we have the First Amendment, which basically protects religious rights. We see where this is put down into um, local, state, and borough laws. Okay. We see where it clearly says in religious land use and personalized religious acts, where no individual, sect, assembly, or organization has the right to limit or deny, okay, another's religious perspective. But yet you're going to single out some religious sects to have partakers in schools and rule other aspects such as hospitals and prison ministry, street ministry even, and yet you're going to deny the same rights to other religions and philosophical sects. So then we have the another aspect of the First Amendment, which says freedom of speech. Anyone who speaks out and separately from those well nourished ones, such as the Judo Christian institutions, are banned, shunned, looked down as jokes, children type beliefs, and everything in between. They're hated, okay? They're despised. So basically, by hating and murdering those types, shutting them down, you're deifying them. You're literally deifying them. You're making them gods. And you're pointing out the fact that they are indeed gods among men. So, but let's go into another aspect here. Okay, what does it take for somebody to become a god or goddess? Okay, let's look at your practices, your magical practices. Okay, you go out and, let's say, for an example, you are a necromancer. Okay, you are a spiritualist. You are gathering the geographic shapes such as the circle of empowerment. You are gathering the athame, the candles. You're pouring your intent into those candles. You're carving symbols into those candles, depending on the type of rite or ritual that you're doing, be it a ritual or a ceremonial. You're gathering all the herbs and the plants, the fumitory aspects, and you're putting them together. And you are going into certain hours of the day or night. Okay. You're going out, you're collecting bones from animals or humans. Okay. A lot of today, they look at this as, oh my God, that is disgusting. It is vile. You are violating a corpse. Okay. It's considered animal cruelty, even. Okay. But yet, this is stuff that has been done even in the JCI. You go back into the book of law, the book of Leviticus, and you see the burnt offerings, the sin offerings. You look at the tabernacle for an example, and you are seeing how the corpse, the rotting flesh, is just sitting there on the altar, just rotting. The smell supposedly gets their god off. Okay, gets his rocks off by sniffing rotting meat. Okay, the blood, the entrails are removed and placed by a on the altar. And you go into the tabernacle and you got vials of blood sitting there being in the offering. I mean, even the sacraments, if you will, is the symbolatry even used today in just about any denomination of the church. I'm talking the blood of my blood, meaning the wine is the blood, the symbolatry of the blood. The cracker has been replaced, is being replaced by the body, the flesh. Okay, so in essence, you're literally envisioning yourself drinking the blood of Jesus. You are envisioning yourself eating his flesh, his very meat. So how is that not different from ripping an animal apart and setting it at different stages within the tabernacle? How about the altars of the ancient Gaelic Druids, where they bled a person out, with a priest underneath collecting that blood in containers? How about the Aztecs, where they ripped the beating heart out of the chest of a living victim, an offering, a sacrifice? It was said that it was most valiant, honorable way to give an offering, to give one's life in the name of their God. Hmm. What was that the Knights of Templar did? Oh yeah, God's name. They waged war across Europe and the Middle East, became known as the private army of the church. They even went as far as being referred to as the guardians of the roads. Hmm. They didn't answer to any politics. They didn't answer to any kingdom, just that of the church, the Vatican. Hmm. How about we go back to the first, second, and third dynasty of Egypt, the Shem priesthood, who worshipped and worked with Anubis, talking embalming, mummification, the cleansing process of the body, organ removing. Huh. But yet they were feared, looked at as dead already and vile, chased out of the region sometimes. One of those members of the Shem priesthood was said to have created the Shemhem Pharesh. More so in Middle Eastern, we see this as the Hashishin. The Hashishin was a priesthood and a religious holy warrior, highly trained in combat, but highly religious sect. We see it again a couple centuries later with the Illuminati, based off science and religion. How is that not any different from agnostic today? Wow. So, again, what is deification? What is the process of deification? Not just to deify something, but to become a deified being. Either way, you've got to put your work into it. You got to be dedicated, committed. It takes a lifetime of study and practice. You got to seek shit out. You've got to ignore all the basic things. You know, one of the biggest things today is politics, what's going on between Biden and Trump. Okay. We're seeing the wars break out between North Korea and China and Russia, going into, Ukraine and firing at allied um, ships. Basically, again, we're going right back to World War I and World War II, where we're seeing the Axis versus the Allies. Wow. Okay. Apparently, humanity has learned nothing over history. So, and those like myself, or say Eric Coetting, who is literally handing you these keys just like Jesus did, just like the Dalai Lama did, just like Buddha has done through teachings, or even the founder of the Quran did. You know, we're the bad guys because we're giving you the keys to the kingdom to show you you're already a fucking god or goddess in your own sense. But yet, you're going to sit there and limit yourself to waging war on sexuality. You're going to wage war on politics just because you don't like somebody. You're going to sit there and perform segregation and subdivisions, and nothing gets done. It's a waste of fucking time. It's like women trying to dominate men. You've knocked shit out of balance so much that now you're paying the fucking price for it. And it's already said by 2030, you know, humanity is going to basically cease to exist within a century or two, within a generation or two. And so, because of the shit. Even with transgenderism, they're saying medical procedures are now showing that there are complications and medical complications that's going to arise because of this shit. Wow. Did we learn nothing from Adam and Eve? Okay. Again, deification. Again, putting your name in the books. Okay. So, even though we go into folklore, even though we go into anthropology, even history, we're seeing what it takes to become a god. But we're also seeing how your name can go down in history. I mean, look at the Trojan War, Odysseus, for an example. Odysseus, you know, he went off to the Trojan War because it's a war of wars. The fall of Troy went down in history because no army has ever defeated the Trojans. Nobody. The fact that this Trojan, horse fooled them into thinking it was a peace offering that turned out to be a fucking trap. Nobody's even heard of this. Okay? So this went down as a moment in history of deification. As being, hey, this was done by the gods. This was done by a god, a man among men who went off to war. He became so fierce as a swordsman that nobody wanted to fuck with him. You go into Homer's Odyssey. What do you see? But a king that goes off on a journey, that goes off to war, and on his way back, he goes through so many trials, so many eras, and so many different paths. And what happens? He becomes associated with sirens. Sirens out of all of them. He even went into the underworld to learn necromancy. And he came back victorious. Not even his own people saw him returning. But he returned from the dead. A god. So, what do we get out of this? Well, let's take a look at this. Let's look at the book of Tobit. 7 to 8 brothers out of 9 died at the hands of Asmodeus. Asmodeus wanted Sarah, the daughter, as his wife. Was so jealous he became wrathful, destructive even. But this one man, this one brother went to this greater angel and said, hey, how do I prevent this? I don't want to die like my brothers, but I want this woman. Wow. The gallbladder of a fish. Nail it to your door. The guy was blind as a fucking bat. But yet, the story goes that he got this fish, nailed this gallbladder to the door. Asmodeus couldn't go past it. Okay. Let's go to the Haitian voodoo. The Bokor. well known for creating powerful Lenga, well known for creation of Zombie, the zombie, a agent of death, destruction, mindless soul. Just goes off to do what it's told to do. But yet, the power to take a life and to give it back, is that not Godhood? Okay. We see it again. Dante's Inferno. Dante's Inferno. One man imprisoned, betrayed, lost his family, his job, his home, his land, his friends, just like Job did in the Bible. But yet, he went down in history as a saint. Wow. Wonder what happened to that cardinal that betrayed him. Interesting, right? And what's interesting here is that in practices today, we meditate, we do a lot of reflection. We practice three key components that open gateways and doorways into other practices: remote viewing, astral projection, and projection. Meditation, void meditation, is something that has been around for a very long time. Musashi was one of the most renowned Japanese swordsmen of his time. Fought 1,000 fights, was victorious in every fight. Now, how did he master that art? His first duel was when he was 13 years old. 13 years old. Imagine being a 13-year-old kid. In Jewish custom, he would be going through the rite of manhood, the bar mitzvah, the Yom Kippur rite. Now, he entered into this competition, archery. It doesn't really say how many competitors. Shows that this one competitor drew his bow, fired it, hit the bullseye. Crowd went wild. Crowd went wild, right? Even the judge or judges gave him high marks because he hit that bullseye, right? But then it was Musashi's turn. This kid, this child, going through the rite of adolescence, gets up there, puts the bow on the string, sets it up, draws the bow. He is so in tune with his surroundings that he suddenly realized, just before letting go, that a bird had come into the range and was flying around. Now, the story goes in the Book of Five Rings that when he fired that arrow, he killed the bird, took it down with one arrow. Everybody was surprised. His opponent knew that he was outmatched, that he was not skillful. Looked at Musashi and bowed in respect, knowing that he had been defeated. Because where he struck a stationary object, his opponent, this child, took out a moving object that suddenly flew into the range. And Musashi never took his eyes off that bullseye, but instead, boom. When asked, how did you do that? How did you do that? He said there was an art called the empty mind, the void mind. In Japanese, it is called Mushin no Shin. And this is the practice of void meditation. This is where you literally allow yourself to become nothing, nothingness, to allow yourself to become observant like a third party. You're not emotional, you're not connected. No. You're tapping into higher dimensions, higher levels of knowledge, things that most people are not even aware of. This allows you to gradually master your environment. Somebody who is a warrior that follows the art of war would tell you that even Sun Tzu said, one who studies his opponent has already won. You've already won. So why go into battle? If somebody is in your face 24/7, yelling at you, remain silent. Remain emotionless. They will bring themselves down because they will show the world exactly who they are and what they're about. Basically, making you a god. Now, I was talking with a shift leader just yesterday at my store. And it was funny because of the fact that one of the coworkers ended up getting a hair across their ass because, a couple of her coworkers were sitting there talking shit, just making jokes, pot shots, and this is what happens when you take a day or two off from work. You come back, you're tripping over boxes, nothing's in the right place, you can't find shit, just basic humor type stuff. And this particular coworker ended up getting a hair across her ass. And this just points out that people can take something good and turn it into something vile. And that's what I told this shift leader when he brought it up to me, is because of the fact that if you are so tied into the world that you can't be objective, that you can't see the other person's views, then there's something wrong there. Those who are so wrapped up in the JCI propaganda will never understand somebody from the left-hand path. They will never accept all the sources that back up what they're saying, such as the Rashar, the Jewish Haggadah, the Talmud, the Book of Tobit, the the old texts, and everything, because that the JCI has drawn upon, but yet they've taken it into a religious zealot contract that prevents them from growth. They've stayed stagnant for 2,500 years. Stagnant. And all they're doing is copying each other. And now what happens when you copy and make a copy after a copy after a copy? Eventually there becomes degradation. Things start getting corrupted, and before long, you've gone from a religious sect into a cult. Now, what happens with cult leaders? They deify themselves as a god. They deify themselves as a god. Hmm. Interesting how that happens, right? Even today, in atheistic Satanism, even Peter H. Gilmore said in a very public video on YouTube, when we say hail Satan, we hail ourselves. We are gods. Hmm. But yet, they want to call upon the very forces that they claim to work with and yet deny at the exact same time. So how is that not hypocritical? How is that not duality? Hmm. Again, you're seeing the natural and the supernatural life force. You're seeing those two separate laws. You see, the natural law, the mundane law, can never grow or expand into the macrocosm because they will never understand that they have to get out of their own way. They have to be subjective and open minded into growing and maturing in the knowledge to come anywhere near the supernatural laws. It would be like coming to the worldly law versus the universal. It's the exact same thing, just a different name, a different era. It's the same old BS. So I ask you again, what does it take for a man to become a god or a woman to become a goddess? What does it take for a god or goddess to become a man or a woman? How do you ascend or descend? Knowing the very depiction of Jacob's ladder. Jacob's ladder. This is where Jesus took two of his disciples, his students, up on Mount Hinnom, and a rift opened up behind him, showing angels ascending and descending upon the ladder. Amazing, right? It shows that anything is possible. So why do you make it harder than it has to be? Look at the text, study the text. Put the time and effort into your studies and practices. The one thing I've learned over the last year, the last 9 months, is that once I stepped away from society, once I stepped away from while doing these videos, and I shut down a lot of my sites. It had nothing to do with enemies. It had nothing to do with curses, black magic, or whatever. No, I stepped away from me because I wanted to get back into what I love doing, which is practicing, becoming acquainted with those that I work with. And I'm talking about demons. I'm talking about fallen angels, and I'm talking about working with my patron and patroness. Okay. And because of this, I've developed a whole new system of refinement when it comes to spell casting. I've got a lot better connection to my patron and patronesses. And because of that, my sensitivity to various different aspects and applications have deepened. Even when I'm at work, I'm seeing things before they happen. I look at it as it's of the world. I don't give a shit. It's above my pay grade. You either promote me or you can, there's the door. I got no problems walking out it. But I'm not going to sit there and argue with people. I'm not going to sit there and have a pissing contest. You either like me or you don't. And the funny thing is that when you're studying works like Sun Tzu's The Art of War, or you're studying the 48 Laws of Power, the 33 strategies of warfare, or you're reading the Russian classic, War and Peace, getting into Stoicism, which is one of the things I've been really delving into over the last few months and the last, of this year, is the ancient thought views and the forums of Stoicism. And it's like, wow, this shit really needs to come back into modern age. It really does. Maybe people won't be so much of a fucking pansy that they shy away from things without, believing what they're spoon fed, So when you get into things like how to become a god, how to become a goddess, how these beings can transcend and descend back into being a mere mortal. History has shown how men and women can grow and become Nephilim through pacts, through dark pacts, through you know, infernal pacts even. But more so, we see in folklore where these applications, these applications show how you can become much, much more. Look at the Irish or Scottish definition of the Siddhi. In Irish, they're known as the Sith. And I know first time I mentioned the term Sith, people are thinking, oh, Jedi, right? Jedi, the enemy of the Jedis. Woo! Red sabers. No, dumbass. I'm talking about actual folkloric entities that have multiple different perspectives and images. Think of the lycanthrope, for an example, the meerkat. They were known as the people of the mounds. It's like going into Slavic, culture and going, wow, Baba Yaga is one badass bitch. You know what I'm saying? I mean, do you understand what it takes to become a witch of a power level of the 12th dimension? The 12th dimension, that's fucking badass. Okay? And then becoming an immortal by ripping your soul out and putting it into object after object, and shoving it on a mysterious island to become a deathless one, a necromancer, a true lick in the making, and then continuing on with your studies and practices, learning and growing. Do you know what kind of effort that takes? I can tell you, since I started this spiritual journey back in January 1st, I made one dedication, basically my intent, the declaration of intent, and I've made 3 blood packs this year alone. But every fucking day, I'm in that altar room at least 2-3 times a day, meditating, getting close to deitas, petitioning them for their wisdom and guidance, giving offerings and sacrifices to them. My face, when my, I've, over this year alone, I have talked with I don't know how many women, made them believe that I would give them the moon and the stars. Not joking. I've literally identified 3 phrases that will tell you everything you need to know about these chicks. Okay? Only to dump them on the fucking curb because I've gotten what I wanted from them. Plain and simple. And the funny thing is, it was just an experiment to me. But even they know point blank that I spend too much time with my face in books, that I have my own private library, and that I've got a library within a 10-minute walk from where I'm at. Go 25, 30 minutes walk, and I've got another library that I'm near. Because I spend most of my time as a mage studying, practicing. Now, how is that not elevating myself above the mundane and becoming a god? Through dedicated, committed practice, a religious practice, dedicating myself to spirituality through mysticism and through magical rites. E.A. Coetting, comes out and goes, names this thing, How to Become a Living God, right? Well, that's more egotistical if you ask me, but that's just me. But I'm not going to sit there and say, I'm a god already. No, I'm a microcosm working my way towards the macrocosm. This for me is about apotheosis. I want to learn everything I can before my last breath in this world, because I know that the main objective is to gain those keys to the kingdom upon going into the realm of the spiritual. If somebody wants to attack me and say, for an example, try to harm me or my family, I'm going to fight to the death. I will fight to the fucking death. I got no problems with it. I will use everything at my disposal to do so. But here it is. I'm not egotistical and I'm not prideful. I just tell you the way it is. I've gotten to that age, that part of my age where I'm sitting there. I'm not interested in excuses. I'm not interested in your failures. It's up to you as the practitioner to take note of your successes and your failures, to take a look at your failures and say, okay, how do I take my failures and make them into positives? It would be like being at work. You're good at what you do. Hell, I know I'm basically the god of the store. Okay. And I've been watching over the last, what's it been now, about a week or two. Okay. The last 2-3 weeks. Since basically, let me put it to you this way. I work hard as a baker and an opener. Okay. I'm the primary baker for my store. I'm known for going between stores as a baker and an opener. Okay. Now, the company that I work for, my district managers, the regional manager, the district manager, and just about most of the general managers are female. Okay, female. Okay, I think I only know right now. There's at least 2 men. One's a GM and the other one's an AGM. Assistant general manager compared to a general manager. And then you have at least 2 men who are shift leaders, but the rest are all women, all women. Okay, so this is more of a sexism war right here, right? But yet, even the owner, who is a woman, has heard my name. Have heard my name. So it's interesting to see how all of them are asking for me by name. Hey, can this guy come over and open my store on this particular day or these couple of days? Can he fill in? They're asking for me by name. So basically, I've made my reputation based off my own work. The 48 Laws says win by action, not through arguing. Okay? So in this case, I have become a god in a sense, in the mundane sense, through baking and opening, through my position and my role on the job. Okay? Does this make me better than anybody else? No, it does not. And I'll be the first one to tell you that. So when we look at this stuff, when we look at this, these some of these people will take advantage of you. Okay, and that's basically where I got that sense that, hey, I need to step back here. I got to step back. Why? Because it feels like I'm being used. Have you ever wondered why the demons don't come forth to a lot of people? Why they don't share their knowledge up front? It's because they want you to be ready for anything and everything that you do. Kind of like a parent to their children. Okay? Mother is the name of God on the hearts and minds of all children. My son ended up in the guidance counseling this morning for the second time after his mother dropped him off. Now, instead of asking, why is it only with you? It became about, oh, you embarrassed me for the second time. This is inappropriate behavior. Did you ever stop to wonder why it's only with you? No. That narcissist perspective is what's preventing you through ego and pride, thinking it's all about you, that you can't comprehend why. Because you're not listening, you're not seeing. So here it is. So one afternoon, one morning, I was working on Sandwich Station, and I was talking with a shift leader, this new shift leader that started about a week or two ago. And because our general manager, this is going to be the 5th general manager this year alone that has basically put her 2 weeks in, and her last day is on my son's birthday, ironically. So, anyways, so we're sitting there in the office and we're talking, and I told him, I said, it's one of these things where you got your general manager doing order taking and cashiering in the drive-through. You've got a 17-year-old refusing to come over to take her station to relieve the cook so that the cook can go on and do the prep. Because at the time, the cook is supposed to be the one that does the prep work for the next day. Okay, meaning you pull stuff from the freezer, you put them on the pans and everything, you put stickers on them so that tomorrow's shifts can come in and go, oh, openers can go, okay, this stuff is for today. Okay, this is what you're supposed to do. But this 17-year-old refused to go to her station. Okay, instead you had 3-4 different people doing drive-through drinks, while the cook is sitting there going, hey, I've got to go in an hour. I've got to leave in an hour. You need to come over and take your spot. No, fuck you. Wow. Really? And the general manager sitting there going, just ignoring. I know. Yeah, yada, yada, yada. And then all of a sudden you blow your fucking top and you're the bad guy. Because you said you either get your ass over here or nobody gets food. You're the bad guy. Next time you come in, don't bring the attitude. Wow. That's mundane law for you. It's how people will use you to their benefit. It's called abuse. Okay? Unfortunately, we see a lot of this between the sexes today, which is why roughly anywhere from 63 to 83% of men have just basically said, I want nothing to do with the females. But you look at the dominance factor in the workplace and it's the exact same thing. So since then, I have taken a step back from filling in other stores and doing extra shifts. But I've been paying attention to the chats, the group chats. And what's interesting is even in Facebook groups or even going through the comment sections of other creators' YouTube videos, even those on TikTok, for an example, you're seeing all these individuals going, what's the name of the movie? What do you think of this? What do you think of that? And they get pissed off and they remove or retract their messages because they don't get a reply. Okay? So here it is. Over the last 3 weeks, I can't tell you how many times I have seen my general manager, the current one, who's getting ready to leave, post, hey, who's available and willing to go to such and such a store ASAP? They need somebody badly. But I sit there and watch. Not one fucking reply. And you know why? Because now they're beginning to realize just how much you, as the practitioner, really did for them. And this is why when you think of a relationship status, there is a balance. No greater connection is forged than that between a deity and their apprentice, the master and the apprentice, the parent and the child, the husband and the wife. There is a balance that must be maintained in the world. And when you don't apply yourself to that balance, things become unbalanced. You get nothing but injustices in the world, corruption, degradation, diseases, you name it. It's there and it is apparent. History has shown this. Events have shown this through carelessness, blindlessness, egotistically and prideful people that don't fucking learn. But yet, somebody like me who sits back and doesn't engage becomes the bad guy because we just give you that information. Those that have ears to hear, eyes to see. Do I have to remind you of the book of Matthew, chapter 7, verses, was it 7 and 8, I think? No, 8 and 9. No, it's one of them. And it says, ask or seek and you will find, knock and I will answer, seek and you will find. Okay? Now, what happens when you transcend and you master your skills? You're not out there publicly doing this, but yet people will send you to certain individuals saying, hey, you need to seek out so and so. They will help you. I look back at the last 4 years of my practices, and I remember I had this gas station attendant ask me for my card. So I gave him my card. And he said, Jesus Christ, fuck me. I go, what? He goes, I thought you were a myth. I thought you were a myth. I had a guy that I spoke with years ago. Within the last decade, he showed up in the drive-through of the last store I ran, as a cashier and crew member. And he said, you remember me? He says, you remember what you told me through that reading? Here I am 2 years later. 2 years later, I have a wife and I have a family. All because I listened to you. Thank you. And I've got people being referred to me. Not because I'm out there in your face 24/7. Not like Yeko Wedding, not like Bokor Leonard Amaro, who's dropping like 50 videos a day. Yeah, you're getting noticed more and more. You're getting those numbers, but it's more about the computer programming of zeros and ones that's keeping you at the forefront. But what's it costing you? In the end, you're going to disappear just like everyone else. So what makes a god? Somebody who literally applies themselves daily to their very practice. Has nothing to do with ego, has nothing to do with pride, has nothing to do with numbers, nothing about being there in the front. Look at the ancient Magi. Look at the ancient practitioners, the Hexa, the Strega, the Strigoi, the Yeshi, the Yaji, the Shaman, the Necromancer. Nowhere in these myths and legends, not even in religious texts, does it say that they're going to out there in the middle of the fucking world and going, hey, I have this service to do this, this, and this. No. It is these kings. It is these individuals saying, hey, I had to go seek this individual out. You can't pay me for my services? Well, guess what? Fuck you. I'm not going to help you. No. That's the modern day greed machine. It's just nothing more than Christianity. It's more about the world. So here it is. What makes a god? What makes a god? But somebody that has multiple ways of dealing with you. Think about that for just a moment. When I looked at my shift leader and I said, for every action that you choose, I have dozens to counteract it. Dozens. Why? Because you're only seeing this, whereas I'm seeing this, and this. Because I'm not a part of the world. You cannot do what we do and be a part of the world. It just does not happen like that. Have you learned nothing from the witch trials, the burning times, the religious wars? History has shown this going as far back as proto-cultures. The sorcerer or sorceress has either lived next to the king of tribal society, such as in African Caribbean traditions, or they've lived on the outskirts of town, if not out in the fucking boondocks somewhere where you've had to travel to get to them. Look at King Saul waging a 40-year war against the Turks. What did he do? Did the Witch of Endor go to him? No. He went to the Witch of Endor. The only stories that you see where Magi went to somebody, or that of an astrologer, would be Nicodemus and the three wise men who went to Jesus of Nazareth because they followed the signs. Now, what separates that from what King Saul did? What about the Shem priest or the Hashishin? Do you know how many people actually sought out the Hashishin? Nobody fucked with them. Not one motherfucker from Islam ever fucked with the Hashishin. They feared them. They respected them. When they spoke, they listened. Why? Number one, they were wise, they were spiritual, and they were highly trained in combat. Specifically Simsera, which is Arabic for assassin. They were assassins. And it's interesting because of the fact that when you look at this, even with the Darkhad, which was run by Genghis Khan, they waged war against the yellow shamans. Who was it that wiped them out? The Huns, the Hordes, were the ones that wiped both of these organizations out. The Vatican wiped out the Illuminati. The mainstream Catholicism, Orthodox Catholicism, even the mainstream JCI has waged wars against witches and warlocks out of fear. How is that not deifying those that you murder? I mean, you literally are putting all your time and effort into one individual. You're deifying them. When an enemy speaks out against me, I remain silent. It says more about them than it does about me. And if somebody comes to me, I'm going to share my conversation with them. Say, this is my dealings with this individual. What a dumbass. 9 times out of 10, that's what I get from these guys. You know, these individuals that come to me saying, hey, so-and-so is talking smack about you. Really? Well, this is my only conversation with them. He's such a dumbass. Or she's a dumbass. Wow. I find it interesting that most of my enemies would rather be my friend and have peace with me than to remain my enemy. Ironic how that works, right? So how is that not deifying you? How is that not making you a god in reality? Am I not eating the food of the gods? Am I not studying and making myself a god through intense study and practice? What about you? What are you doing to achieve this status? And how can you, as a practitioner, gain that same level of respect, that same level of power Are you putting the work in? Are you gathering the tools, doing the research, continuing a daily life of, say, for an example, fasting? Are you working out? Are you doing whatever you can to gain that knowledge and wisdom? Are you experimenting through alchemical practices? Are you spending daily times of hell, even up to hours, really, doing meditations and summonings, working with certain spirits? You know, I spent 3 months just on one spirit alone. That's 90 days. 90 days working with a single spirit. Hell, I've worked an entire year with a single spirit before. There is no time limit when working with these beings. It is a matter of you making the time, putting in the effort to work with them. And they're sharing with you images, feelings, impressions. They're showing you things and teaching you and guiding you to that power. But yet you want to sit there and feud amongst yourselves. You want to sit there and create denomination, segregation, and everything in between that is based off worldly views. If you are as truly spiritual as you claim to be, then why not lead by example? Follow the 48 laws of power put forth by Robert Greene. Win by action, not by arguing. And if you claim to be a master, then you've already mastered yourself. That means quieting your mind, quieting your heart, and applying yourself through a lifetime of excruciating discipline. Did you know that the Catholics, the Roman Catholics, used to sit there and scourge themselves? I'm talking bullwhipping themselves, just whipping their backs, creating scars themselves. That takes a lot of discipline, dedication to do that multiple times a day, just to bring your flesh into obedience. They used to have these barbed wires that they wrapped around their thighs and they would tighten it, just like what happened to their God, Jesus, while he was tortured, beaten, spat upon, blood running down his face while he's carrying his own crucifix on his back. This is spiritual. This is dedication and commitment to your path working. Being that disciplined and that committed to your practice is the exact same thing as applying yourself to your duties on the job. When you're a man and you're in a relationship, then you need to have that same dedication and commitment in balancing everything out from your practices, your work, and your family life, and applying it to your family as well. As a father, I have to put my son before myself. I've had no issues dropping my son off at school. I've had to refrain from associating with my mother and my son's mother because they tend to try to put me into the middle. And it's like, no, not going to happen. You two lock yourselves in a room and you duke it out. But I'm not getting in the middle of it. It's not my issue. You two have an issue with each other. You deal with it. Her mother doesn't want to talk with me, sit down with me. That's on her. I'll respect her wishes, but I'm not getting in the middle of it. You want to keep throwing your current boy toy in my face? I'm not going to pay any attention to you. Because my dedication is to my son, to my work, and to my practices. I have commitments and I have oaths that I have to uphold. Not only as an ordained religious multi faith archbishop, but as a practitioner. I have given my word and my oath, not only to my son, but to those that I work with. When I was hired on as a baker and an opener, I gave my word that I would be responsible and do my job. They gave me the keys to their building, to their corporation. They gave me the alarm codes. That is on me to uphold and keep the integrity going. They put their trust in me. Just like the spirits that I work with put their trust in me. Because they're not going to sit there and go, you need to learn your job. Well, I'm going to give you all the tools you need, but I'm not going to do the work for you. Now, they'll sit there and show you, okay, here's some videos. This is what your job entails. Even when you fill out your application, this is what that position entails. This is what it's entitled to do. This is what you are entitled to do when you are hired on for that position. So if you become an apprentice to a master, okay, your master is your elder in whatever religious foundation that you choose. There is no stronger bond than that master to the apprentice, to a parent, to a child. There is no stronger bond. It is the same thing when you're working with spiritists. There is no stronger bond than that between them and you. But they're not going to do the work for you. They will guide you. They will teach you. They will give you the fucking tools to do what you do. But you have to be motivated. You have to be self-proficient. And you have to be the one to show that you are growing yearly. Ironic, isn't it? So again, gods and goddesses to mankind, to humanity. These spiritual beings came down to be with the daughters of men who produced Nephilim, right? The Sadi and even the Elven have produced offspring through European folklore with mankind. Even the gods have mingled and had affairs with mankind, with mortals, producing demigods. But it's up to you to choose, no matter if it's folklore, history, religious perspectives, or even just plain alchemical practices, or, say, for example, philosophy. It is up to you on how you want to be remembered. Do you want to become a living God, or do you want to study and be given that honor on when you go into the next realm, the next life? You want those keys given to you. I mean, think about it. Abaddon is known as the angel of the bottomless pit, who holds the keys to the lake of fire. And it's said that after Jesus' crucifixion, that he spent 3 days in the underworld. The poetical text shows that when he went in, Beelzebub said, "Hey, I want nothing to do with you." You know? So Beelzebub, who was known as the witches, the god of the witches, was removed from the throne, and Satan was put on that throne. And he took those keys with him when he came back to this fucking realm before ascending to the throne in heaven. All these texts, all these things, and 90% don't even fucking know it because they're just rolling through the motions. That's all they're doing, rolling through the motions. So again, how do you want to be remembered? How do you want to evolve? You want to make something quick through a blood pack with Mephistopheles? Perhaps align yourself with the forces of darkness through the infernal pact. Maybe even make the blood pact with a demon and become an apprentice of that demon. Or maybe you've had such, you've gotten to that point in your life where nothing in this world really intrigues you. Nothing really excites you anymore, and you're looking to evolve. So you make that dark pact, the fourth pact, and you look at all things from other realms, other dimensions. You look at how do you grow and become that Nephilim? How do you become a demigod on the verge of becoming a god? That traversing those different steps on that ladder. How do you do it? Do you even know? I mean, I've only given you just a couple of sources. Just a couple of sources in this video. I've given you numerous examples. Just numerous examples. But it's not up to me to do that work. That's up to you. I don't give a shit if you rise or you fall. You can become the phoenix rising from its own ashes, or you can become just another revenant of a former self. That's on you to do. I can only show you that door. I can only open that door. But I'm not going to do that work for you. LK, Alkalone, Jeffrey 524, and Judy Carter. Welcome to the channel. Exactly, Judy. Exactly. You have to question everything. You have to research everything, and you actually have to apply it to your life, meaning working. That I actually concur with. If I had just sat back all those years ago and let everything be given to me, then I'd be this just a lazy fool that doesn't know shit. But instead, I dared to question, and I was asked not to come back to churches. I've been shunned. The more knowledge I've gathered, the more I find myself alone. I've come to realize that it's not ascendance, it's an honor. It just means that you don't these people don't rely to you because they don't understand what you're talking about, because they don't have the balls to research on their own. They don't have the balls to separate from society and go, I want to learn. I want to grow. I want to evolve. No, they just want to go through the motions. They want to be a part of something. They want to feel like they've been a part of something, that they belong to something. They want to connect to any number of topics instead of being an individual. A great example of this is the fish. When you look at a school of fish, they always flock in one direction. But every so often, you get that one fish that goes against the tide. While most fish are going downstream, this one fish is going upstream. That's a practitioner. That is a practitioner going upstream instead of down. They're not taking the easiest route. They're working their ass off, going through trials. They're going through, well, let's call it the way it is, the fire, if you will. They're going to sit there. You point a firing squad at them. They're going to just walk right through those bullets. Why? Because they want to learn. They want to grow. They want to question everything. And that's one of the key things that makes a magi or a mage great, is because you're constantly seeking out knowledge. It's more important, not this worldly shit about, oh my God, why are guys not going to the gym? Why are they not fucking, talking to me in the workplace? Who gives a shit? You're there to do a fucking job. You're not there to make friends. Oh my God, this person made a comment. Oh my God, I got a hair across my ass. Who gives a fuck? You want to pull that shit? Go someplace else. you know. But no, when you get into a religion or a philosophical pursuit, you got to be the one to decide, how do you want to be remembered? How do you want to be seen? What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind you? Plain and simple. Do you want to become a god now and end up in the house of the dead gods, or do you want to actually work your ass off and evolve and become a god down the road and go, hey, I've earned this. I've earned this. I'm reaping what I've sown. I'm not sitting here going, okay, all these motherfuckers are going this direction. They're hating on this person. I'm going to go with it. I want to be a part of this. No. I'm not going to take that route of going, okay, I'm going to look for the food of the gods and then go, oh, I'm now a god. No. I'm going to work my ass off and earn every fucking step. If that means I have to bleed, I have to shed tears, I have to fucking break bones, I'm going to do it. If I have to sit there and spend hours, and I have spent hours in my own altar room, my own temple, to the point where I go to stand up and my body is going, ow, my feet are asleep, my calves are asleep, my joints are going, what the fuck did you just put me through? I've got tension in my neck because of the way I've been sitting for so long in complete void meditation, communing with the gods, practicing, going into other realms, other dimensions. Trust me on this when I tell you, this is not a path for the faint of heart. You want to work your way to being a god or a goddess? Don't take the easy way. Work your ass off. And trust me, you'll be better off for it. Don't pick up a book and go, oh, I'm a lord of darkness now. Fuck that. You're a lord of your own stupidity if you do that. No, you're going to be reading multiple sources. You're going to be going into various different texts. You're going to go into the history, folklore, anthropology, thanatology, even. You're going to go into world mythologies. In 6 years, I've written, what's it been now? About 4 years, I've written 7 essays on different aspects of the journey. From what necromancy is, to the gods, to the priesthood, to the actual practices. And it's interesting to see. I've had 3 of these essays already published, and I put forth the 4th one. But guess what? I've written so many essays that I'm up to 7 essays, and I'm still going. Eventually, I'm going to have my own book, but it's more of a grimoire. And the reason for that is because this is my legacy. And when I get an apprentice that's worthy enough, and I end up getting ready to go kick the bucket and go on to the next realm or the next part of my evolution, I'm going to hand that grimoire to that worthy opponent. If not, it's going to be buried with me, because that is what happens with a grimoire. It's either handed down to a worthy successor or it's buried with the practitioner. Look at the Munich manuscripts. It was buried with the author, only to be dug up by a future generational grandson who published it. So, guess what? Again, it comes down to you. So, I've given all these sources. I've given you, hell, I've given you different perspectives from Apotheosis and the views of a lifetime of study to that of actual ascendance. It comes up to you. So at this point, I'm going to call it quits. I'm going to let you digest everything that's been said, take notes even, and the playbacks. For those of you who want to be kept up to date, feel free to hit that subscribe button. Feel free to hit that notification button so you know when I'm on next. And if not, that's on you. I'm not going to sit there and tell you what you should and shouldn't do. But I want to thank everybody who's tuned in. I want to thank those who have commented here: LK, Alkalone, Jeffrey, and Judy. It means a lot. So thank you for coming on and communing with me. So with that said, have a good day. I've got a couple of hours before I got to go pick up my son from school. So, all right, have a good one. I'm out.